Thank you. Thank you. Glad to be here in sunny California. I came from Georgia, where the temperature was 80 degrees and humidity was about 105. And so this is a nice reprieve from that. And spent a day up in Lake Tahoe where they had, I guess, 550 inches of snow. We had two. It shut the city down for about a day and a half. But I am happy to be a part of the California Forum on Innovation and Transportation. And today's title of the presentation is Empowering Digital Government Through a Digital Platform. Just a show of hands, you don't have to speak up, but who here knows what a digital platform is? And I'm not talking about the camera that you might have, one or two, good. So I actually have a leg up on you because I think I know what it is. But as we go through, we'll talk about that. And within the handout, so you'll get, these are active links. So if you do want to get in contact with me or whoever, or find out a little bit about what's going on, I'm not going to do a bio or anything. I've been with Gartner for now 17 years. And prior to that, I was with an integrator. And prior to that, I was with the U.S. government, doing some work with the military. And so a long history of being in and out of technology, if you will. But one of the first things that we'll cover in today's session is what is digital. And it's not really going to provide a definition of what the word digital means. Theoretically, we all know what that means, right? As opposed to analog. Then we'll look at some strategic planning assumptions. We'll also look at a couple of the goals that, according to the California Information Technology Strategic Plan that is currently in place, where digital might play within that area. And exactly what is digital? We'll start right there. So there's digital chaos, right? There's digital this and digital that. And there's just a whole lot of digital, but we're going to break it down into three primary definitions. The first one being what digital government is. And this is according to Gartner, so we all know it's, gospel and written down and everything. Of course, there's no other opinions. Digital government is basically the design to use data in optimizing and transforming and creating services. So a way to use the data. Very simple, not rocket science again. Let's touch on a little bit about what digital business is. Now there's a little bit more definition here and hopefully everybody can read it. I was advised to make it as big as possible. So I went down like on a 25% scale on my notebook to see if I could read the slide at a very small size, and that's kind of how I came up with this font size. So digital business uses location awareness, that's interesting, the Internet of Things, wearable computing, which I put mine in my bag, right? Smart gateways, right? Maybe a smartphone, maybe other types of gateways, to create designs that create value on the fly. Now I have an example later on about how we create a civic moment, and within that civic moment, I'm not going to tell you the time period up front, but I want you to look at the time period that we estimate could take place, not as in place today, but could be in place as a result of creating value on the fly. And then lastly, the intent of this presentation, which is the platform. We believe that a digital platform is a business-driven framework that allows for a community of partners and providers and customers and citizens, just a whole plethora of individuals and entities to share and enhance processes. You can throw the word digital if you want to in front of that, or to extend their current business benefit. Again, as we go through the example in just a few slides, we'll kind of talk about this. So far, so good? But first, let's look at some strategic assumptions. First assumption that we're going to make is that in 2 years, 50% of million people cities will gladly, right? People living in those will gladly give up their voluntary personal data in order to receive something of value. That's a powerful thought. Personally aware of a city on the West Coast that tracks cell phones as they transit the city to help in traffic control. So as you enter the city, your unique identifier for your phone, not your phone number, right, but your unique identifier for your phone is picked up, and tracked so they can say, well, this red light seems to be malfunctioning because everybody stopped. Or there's something else going on there, at which point the cameras kick in, right? So the thought process is that people would gladly give up their information. Now in that case, they're unwittingly giving up their information, and there's probably some privacy concerns there. But nonetheless, it's happening. It's in place today, and it's occurring today. Secondly, by 2020, more than 20% of local government is going to benefit in some revenue way from this value of data sharing, right? So not only are citizens going to be willing to give up their data, our individuals, but they're also, the local entities are going to be able to make some revenue off of it. That's an interesting point. And then lastly, by 2020, and you may not see the relevance of all this, but you will, by 2020, 30% of government agencies will have a cloud first, and not only cloud first, but public cloud first policy, right, for all new initiatives. This doesn't mean that you're going to take that old waterworks application that is working and working and working, and all of a sudden you're going to move it to the cloud. No, we're talking about new things, new enablement. So question for you. Where and how far in advance does your planning cycle go? Does it go to 18, 19, 20, 21? Because the rate of change that is occurring within the digital environment is very fast. And the things that you think of and plan for today may be obsolete in 18 months, right? So one of the items that we look at is some of the goals that you have, whether it's the responsive, accessible mobile government, and these came from the current plan that's based on the internet, out on the internet right now, of having online and accessible information and services available to the citizenry. Another one deals with leadership and collaboration. Private partner-public partnerships is important. We have a term for that, and you'll see it within the ecosystem. We like to think of it as part of the ecosystem, so pay attention to that particular word, ecosystem. Another aspect is efficient and reliable information, infrastructure, and services. So let's think about that for a second, right? Communication to the citizenry. Who here has yet to receive an Amber Alert or a weather alert? If you've never received one, raise your hand. Exactly. 10 years ago, 5 years ago, there would have been a bunch of you that raised your hands. Today, as a matter of fact, Amber Alerts, they come up on your phone, they come up on the highway signs, they come up everywhere, and most of the time, they catch whoever has taken the child. That's pretty impressive within 5 years, that technology being activated and deployed. Now, here's the question. Have you ever gotten an Amber Alert for a town that you're not actually in? Or a state that you're not in? Probably not. Some may, but you probably haven't. So when we're talking about location-specific information, how did they know to send you the Amber Alert when you're in that town visiting? That's not where your phone is registered. So these are the types of things that we're looking at and types of things that we're thinking about as we come across in what we'll call civic moments. Another one is making sure the information is secure. We talked about the city that is registering phones as they come and go. Well, we want to make sure that information is accurate. We want to make sure the information is available, relevant, and is useful, right? It's great having information. Yeah, we can capture all the cell phones coming and going, but what are you going to do with that data? We want to have outcome-based uses of data, because once we have that, we can determine where the activity and where the business changes need to occur. Next, we want to have a capable IT workforce. I'm going to remove the word IT for a minute and just put in employment workforce, a capable workforce, period, right? Because it is important that not only IT have a capable workforce, but IT enable the other side of the workforce as well. Goal number 6, responsive and effective IT procurement. Well, who's heard of the matching technique? Anybody? Who here took Uber or Lyft to get here? You were in the matching business model, right? You requested something, it matched you with it, and then you came forward to it. Imagine your procurement function behaving in the same way, right? Pre-qualified, automated, and everything else. But now imagine that same matching technique extending beyond the government boundaries into the partnership with private sector and public sector, right? That ecosystem that we're talking about. That's really what we're talking about. So at a micro level, think about micro level. Competitor, competition, and bidder participation. When you got the Uber ride or Lyft ride or whatever ride you got, sidecars defunct, so whenever you got the Uber or Lyft, you put in a request and it matched you amongst a bunch of other competitors for that ride, right? You had the opportunity to decline it and restart, right? But nonetheless, that was a micro version of competition and bidder participation. There's a whole series of business models around this one aspect itself. So how do you go about determining what platforms, what capabilities are most beneficial and most helpful for enabling some of these objectives and goals? Well, I'd like to introduce the Gartner Hype Cycle. Hopefully some of you have seen it before. In the Gartner Hype Cycle, we go from innovation through the plateau of productivity, right? And there's this big lump in the middle. And the work that I do is typically on that front side, right? Where there's a new capability that comes about. The next thing you know, people are jumping on board with that capability. Yes, we want that too. I want that new phone. I want that, whatever the case may be, the new car that has the built-in stuff. Then they get it and they realize, well, it wasn't as fancy and it didn't work quite like I wanted it to. Then people start adopting it and it becomes standard. And the next thing you know, it becomes commoditized. And the commoditization portion is where there's large uptake. The thought process, though, is as items go through, as capabilities, as new platforms come through, they all fly through this hype cycle, but they fly through at different speeds. Some items go through very fast. Some items take over 10 years to go through. That has a big impact on your choices. And those choices can be very, very large. Let's take a look at the digital government hype cycle from Gartner from 2016. There are a lot of items on here, and there's a lot of ways to mix and match these items to provide a service. We'll kind of talk about that a little bit. But what I want you to realize too, that if we apply the same color construct as we just saw, early items within platforms, right? Early capabilities, early platforms, everybody's jumping on board. Some are succeeding, most are R&D. Does your procurement cycle allow for a 6-week R&D, right? Something very fast. Likewise, when it comes to the overall platforms themselves, what's best for digital government? There was a whole laundry list of platforms on there. What I'd like to do is kind of lay out a few. So there's social media engagement, right? You have social websites and social Facebook and Twitter and Instagram and et cetera. There's also fraud detection to make sure the people posting possibly are there, and you have some legal aspects. There's smart cities. There's smart city frameworks, smart lights. There is predictive analytics. There's smart transportation. And now we're beginning to see a few more contexts even within the state. And then there's the IoT platforms. You probably interacted with over 100 IoT platforms on your walk here today. Smart robots, geospatial, customer engagement hubs, case management. There is a lot of platforms that are in use. And for the IT department, this listing of platforms is complexity, where it might make it easy for the citizen or the employee or the contractor. It makes it extremely difficult for IT to manage all these platforms and to know how to leverage them. So Gartner has come up with an idea about platforms. They said the digital business platforms, they're comprised with citizens, right? Customers, if you will, about how you engage and the value chain of those things. So if anybody's heard the word journey map, this is a great example of journey mapping, right? Of how you go about procuring something or how you go about getting something from your point of view. There's also intelligence, and there was just a session on big data right before this one. The intelligence is really how you make decisions, how you're going to make decisions. And again, this can be on a micro level. The intelligence is about what car to send for the Uber or Lyft pickup is based upon the geospace, the rating. Have they been judged with them before? Did they give them a 2 and you don't want to ever ride with them again? Those are all things that takes place within that time period that you see arcing around, waiting on your ride or sliding around, depending on which one you're using, waiting on your ride. Think about the speed at which this is occurring, the ecosystems, the partnerships. And I'm going to go back to the rideshare example. When you go onto your mapping program, does it offer to hail a ride for you now? Right? Yes, a lot of them do. You can get a ride hail from Facebook, as a matter of fact. So that's 2 systems, 2 different partnerships that are working together. How do you run this? Well, the first thing you want to do is figure out a way to engage and kind of have a cycle by which to deploy these things. You start with ambition. That's to investigate all the possibilities, and we have an example that we're going to walk through. The next thing is you kind of make a design, not a huge design, not a massive design, not a moonshot, if you will, but a design so that you can get to a minimal viable product. That presents challenges for the public sector because it's all about the RFP, which a minimal viable product oftentimes is not about the RFP. It's about just getting something working so we can see if it actually has legs. Then, once we found something that works, and you may fail at it several times, then you begin to scale and deliver, right? Then you begin to revise based upon the demographics. You can see this by the way organizations roll out applications within the iPhone and the Android stores. Some parts of the countries get the new version before others do. Think about that as it applies to your organization. You have a very large state. The demographics of the state vary dramatically as you go through. Some are willing to participate in new stuff. Other people want stuff that just plain works. If you want to think in terms of hype cycle, you have citizenry and portions of your departments that are willing to be on the leading edge and to try new things and are willing to fail. You have other portions of the organization that want to be on that tail end out there on the plateau of productivity, and they don't want anything to fail. They don't want stuff that's new or eventful. So what Gartner has done, and this is a 2017 iteration, so not many people have seen this. This is still fairly early on. What Gartner's done is we've kind of built a holistic approach, and in this particular case, it's to the Civic Moment. It's centered around the business model, right? It's centered around the technology model, and it's also centered around the operating model. And as you can kind of look at it, if you have the ability to organize your platforms according to the digital platform model that we saw, the nice flower looking thing, or the splat, if you want to consider it that. Some of us are calling it the splat. You can talk about how you engage. You can talk about how you decide a new business model. Maybe you decide to partner with somebody, and I know these are kind of hard to see. You can talk about the ecosystems, how you interact with those partners. You can talk about how you build competencies and skills, and those competencies and skills that you don't want to build to, that you just want to have.